Today, I will be sharing 3 essential skills for better coaching conversations. And this actually can be just for better conversations in general. It doesn't have to be coaching specific conversations. Take a moment and think of a conversation that left you inspired, something that affected you deeply. What was that like? It may have given you something to think about. It may have left you thinking about taking action, and that is a coaching conversation. So why we talk about this? Why better conversations? So better conversation is about deeper connections, stronger relationships, more fulfillment, and that's really the purpose of having a better conversation. Imagine this line with 4 marks. You can just imagine that line in your mind, or put it down on a piece of paper in front of you, or imagine you have it on the floor. And the first mark here is something about pretending to listen. Think about a conversation you've had and you could tell that the person is just pretending to listen, multitasking as you're talking to that person, and they're just hearing what you're saying, but they're not really into that conversation. But the second mark here is about listening to reply. Again, you may be able to think of an experience or a conversation that you had with someone, and they're not fully in the conversation with you. They're hearing you, but they're basically checking in and out of the conversation as you're talking. So that's what I call listening to reply. They're thinking about how they're gonna respond to what you're saying. If you move on to the third mark here, you may have experienced a conversation that someone is listening to you to understand what you're saying, but they don't really understand. They don't understand the meaning behind the words. They're not paying attention to the tone of voice or the emotion that you're speaking with. So that's listening to understand. The fourth mark is listening deeply. So what I call listen deeply, someone is listening to you, to the emotion, they're in tune with the tone of voice, fully present with you. So take a moment and think about that kind of conversation. You have been in a conversation where the person is fully present, they're listening to you, they understand the context, they're noticing the emotion, the facial expression. How does that affect you? Take a moment and think about that, and just kind of bring that feeling that you had with this conversation to the surface. All right, so this is the first essential skill for having this sort of better conversations is listening. And again, the listening, as I went through those 4 levels, pretend to listen, just hearing the person, but you're not really listening. Listening to reply, you're listening, but you're in your head trying to think about how to formulate the response. You're listening to understand, you understand the words, you understand the meanings of what they are saying, but you don't have the fully present. And then the 4th level here is listening deeply, being there and listening deeply. You may be familiar with this quote. I've learned people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And listening fully is that experience, making a person feel seen. Acknowledging the person, this is another skill. Acknowledging the person is to acknowledge the person, to acknowledge the situation. That's another skill, to have that conversation. As you listen to them fully, you can acknowledge things that were hard for that person. Like, that was a tough call. This is a difficult situation for you. Acknowledge the person. You are a true leader. You handled this well. So sort of a start with a you, and as you acknowledge the person. And then the third skill here is about asking good questions. So think about the questions that we ask on a daily basis. How are you? How are you doing? What's happening? Things like that. And those questions are fine, but they don't really establish that sort of connection. So if someone talk about something important, if you're fully present and listening to the person, you may notice that they talk about something that's important to them. You could dig deeper into the conversation and ask them, what makes this important to you? What else? What's getting in the way of doing what you have always wanted to do? So sort of a good question is open-ended, and it allows the person to open up and talk more and dig deeper. So these are the 3 skills: listening deeply, acknowledge the person, the situation, ask good questions, and voila.